We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We have always been at war with East Asia. So wrote George Orwell in his classic dystopian novel 1984. The public was expected to believe hook, line, and sinker the rewriting of history in real time. And any who question, well, woe betide them. You're listening to Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's show, we're talking a rewriting of history, grifters keep grifting, and why CRT is coming for classical music. It's going to be quite the show. I want to take a moment to say a special thank you to our listeners out in Evergreen, Alabama, on WNWF 1470 AM and WPNS on 1140 AM. Thank you for being here. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Those words you think you know, well, they don't mean what you think they mean, or at least that's the impression coming out of the White House and the complicit Fourth Estate. Commonly used terms and expressions now have brand new definitions to suit the current administration. What a wonderful coincidence for a president in crisis. What's behind this Orwellian redefining of language? Well, to help with that, we're joined by economist and author, Mr. Andrew Moran. Welcome back to the show, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
Right, great. So recession, it was once regarded as 2 consecutive contracting quarters of GDP growth. And now, fortunately for President Joe Biden, this just isn't the case, is it, Andrew? Tell me more.
Well, we were always at war with Oceania, or men can get pregnant now. But yeah, I mean, this is just standard Biden fare at this point. You know, reality is completely abandoned in the White House. And a lot of the time, the administration can't even get its story straight. You look at Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. She was asked, how do you define a recession? She says, oh, I don't know. I don't know how you define a recession. And Brian Deese, you know, he was caught a couple years ago by saying a recession is 2 straight quarters of negative growth. Now he turns around and says that's not the case anymore. So overall, I mean, they're looking at specific metrics that provide a positive spotlight on their administration and their policies, completely avoiding everything else. And then their lapdogs and media are doing the exact same thing. And what's funny, too, is that when the White House published that blog post saying we need to essentially redefine the term recession, then everyone's saying, okay, yeah, we need to do the same thing now.
Yeah, it's as you pointed out on Liberty Nation television, recession is defined by if you're a Democrat, this, if you're a Republican, it's that. Now, what I want to know is why are the economists and political pundits burning their reputations in advancing this idea that the US isn't in a recession, or the recession is no longer quantified as 2 contracting quarters of growth? Why are they willing to burn reputation?
Well, I'm not going to go into the motives, but I can look at their history. I mean, look at Paul Krugman, for example. He said that inflation wasn't going to happen.
If we must.
Paul Krugman, he said that inflation wasn't going to happen. Then he said inflation only impacts the wealthy. And now he finally has a mea culpa by saying, okay, yeah, and I was wrong about inflation. He also said that the Biden economy is going to boom and it's going to be great. And then the recession happens. And now he says, oh, the Biden economy boomed too much. So that's why we're in the situation we are in now. So, I mean, a lot of these guys, perhaps they look at specific data, perhaps it's their political beliefs, whatever the case. But overall, I mean, if you're just a neutral economics observer, you can't say this is the greatest economy in U.S. history. It's far from it. You know, I think the best strategy a lot of these economists are taking is saying, okay, you know, they're kicking it too. They're saying, okay, fine, we're not in a recession, but the economy is showing signs of slowing down. That's the problem, and we can't just be so gung-ho about saying, yeah, recession is here. So perhaps that's the case a lot of them are approaching.
Very generous of you to avoid talking about the motivations, Andrew. Now, I think it's quite telling that over the period of 3 or 4 days when the recession data came out, when the GDP data came out, Wikipedia, which at the best of times is not a great source for factual information, and people began rewriting the entry for the word recession. I believe it was over 40 times it was edited back and forth. And we've seen this kind of thing too in other areas, like Merriam-Webster's dictionary changing the definition of woman, for example. Now, to me, this is more than just tinkering around the edges of economic data. This is an Orwellian rewriting of history, or I don't know. Am I going too far in my
Spiritual.
worries?
It's probably a bit of both. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of bad actors out there who want to, redefine the term to put, Biden in a positive light. They don't want to admit that this is a horrific economy, or perhaps they're trying to do the dirty work of the Democrats by trying to redefine it ahead of the midterms and not give the Republicans an advantage, because it's guaranteed the Republicans are going to say no matter what, the economy is a recession, and that's going to help them heading into midterms, perhaps even 2024. That Wikipedia thing, I mean, that's just really astounding to observe in real time. I was on Twitter and I saw all that constant changes, and it baffled me, and this is just, I don't know what happened. I mean, the whole standard for many years has been a recession is 2 straight quarters of negative GDP growth. Now, I don't like the GDP. I don't like it. I think it's an unreliable metric. But this is the standard data point that the establishment has utilized for decades. And now, just because Biden doesn't look good, they want to change it. I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think some people are opting for a middle ground on the language, though, and perhaps realizing that they are in the process of trashing their reputations on the altar of rewriting history. And people are calling it a progress recession. Now, Andrew, a progress recession, what on earth does this mean?
Well, I'm guessing it means what Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen recently said, or even Brian Deese when they said that, oh, we're not in a recession. What we are in is an economy that's transitioning to slower growth. I mean, so they're doing damage control ahead of really horrible economic data coming out. But this whole progress recession, I mean, I've heard similar statements before in the last few months to try to justify the current economic conditions. But this is absurd. And what's another thing too? It's funny is that when you see these same media outlets, who say, "Oh, we have to rely on the National Bureau of Economic Research before we make any declaration that there is a recession," these are the same people who complained that there are white people who are serving on the NBER. So I think that's pretty hilarious. And one more thing too, if you look at some of the recent economic data, it's hard to suggest that there's going to be even slower growth happening. So, for example, there was a great report from S&P Global's chief economist, and he was looking at the recent PMI data, and he found that a lot of the PMI data is as bad as it was during the 2008 financial crisis.
Mm.
So, barring, of course, the pandemic. So, looking ahead, you can't even say growth recession, because there isn't going to be any growth at all. And you either have the high inflation, or you have zero growth, or you have the Federal Reserve, destroying your currency. So, it's hard to think anything at all is going to be positive in the coming months or years.
You have, for example, CNN running a headline saying that progress recession has been here for decades, as if this is old hat. Everybody should know about it. And let's be fair, you're stupid if you didn't. But I did some basic sleuthing on the interwebs, and the only reference I can find to progress recession comes from the Vermont Gund Institute in 2018. It seems more like a handy catchphrase to defer concerns about an actual recession rather than being something specific that we could say we are in a progress recession. But I have a final question for you, Andrew. Now, Biden's been saying that we're not in a recession because of the job numbers. But don't the latest figures show that job numbers are also tanking?
Yeah, the headline print. I mean, the headline print has been astounding. Nearly 3 million jobs created in the first 6 months of 2022. But the problem is that a lot of this growth is slowing down. You look at the 4-week average of initial jobless claims, that has been climbing every single week since the middle of April. You look at real wage growth, which is inflation adjusted wage gains, that's been negative 4.4%. You look at a lot of the small business numbers, they're slashing tens of thousands of jobs every month. You look at a lot of the large corporations, Netflix, Meta, Tesla, Alphabet, whatever the case, Ford, all these major companies are slashing hundreds or thousands of jobs. So it's gonna slow down. I mean, and then that's inevitable. The Federal Reserve, it's raising interest rates. That's gonna weigh on business activity. A lot of these companies, they're pessimistic. All these consumer and business sentiment indexes, everyone is bearish. There maybe have a slight uptick here and there, but overall, you look at, let's say, the Fed Manufacturing Services Index, you're saying, how can we survive another 2 years of this administration in this current environment? So overall, I mean, yeah, the jobs market, that's coming down, and then that was the only positive aspect of this Biden economy that everyone celebrated. Now that's gone. You ask, what the heck is left?
Well, there's always a progress win in the 2022 midterms for Democrats. It doesn't look like a win, but it is. Don't believe your lying eyes. Andrew Moran, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Later in the show, we talk cultural Marxism coming for classical music. But up next, after this short break, we ask how the Taliban managed to fool Joe Biden. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for
I think
LibertyNation.com.
we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
Daily tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for
Guess what?
Thursday.
We're doing
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.